Live from the Pix 11 Social Media Center. She's got more than 30 years on the streets as an investigative reporter. Now, Pix 11's Mary Murphy takes you deep into the world of cold cases, terrorism, America's drug crisis, and more. These are the Mary Murphy Files.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us on a Tuesday night on Pix 11 Facebook Live. Normally, we're on Mondays, but we've promised you since the junior trial started that we would do a show at the beginning of each week of testimony and then another show at the end of the week. So we were live on Friday, and we recapped the first week. Now we're here to start the second week, which began today. And it was a very busy day. The prosecution put in dozens and dozens of freeze frames of still photos into evidence, trying to establish that the 5 murder suspects on trial for killing Lisandro Jr. Guzman Feliz were indeed at the scene, on the sidewalk, on the street, outside the bodega, which is located on East 183rd Street and Bathgate Avenue in the Belmont section of the Bronx. So for much of the day, we were very busy in the courtroom keeping up with all the testimony from Detective Francis Orlando, who works with Bronx Homicide. Now, let me show you the latest thing first. When we left court today, a little bit after 4 o'clock, Junior's parents pretty much said they wanted to talk to the media. They were facing a pack of reporters and cameras. That's the shot that I got outside. There's a breezeway at the side of the Bronx County Hall of Justice. Junior's parents, Leandra Feliz and Lisandro Guzman, asked to speak to reporters. Normally, we don't really talk to them after testimony at trial. They're usually led away by court officers and detectives from the NYPD, but today they asked to speak to reporters. And part of it was because it was very compelling what they had to watch today. You know, I know, that they've seen over and over again those surveillance videos that showed Junior being dragged from the bodega to his deadly fate on the sidewalk. It's very difficult for parents to have to watch something like that. Today, they watched freeze frames of the same episode, basically different moments trying to establish which suspect was where on the sidewalk. There was one point where allegedly it was Jose Muniz in a white tank top outside the door where Junior was dragged out, and you see Junior grabbing at the door jamb, trying to save himself so that he doesn't have to get dragged out onto the sidewalk. He knows what awaits him will be terrible. So I was sitting behind Leandra Feliz, Junior's mother, when she was watching these freeze frames, and at one point she literally doubled over because she's not supposed to show emotion in court. She's not supposed to distract the jury, but she could not contain herself. It was very hard to watch. When the parents left court, first we saw Junior's father, and one of the Spanish language TV reporters asked him a question about how difficult it was to watch those freeze frames. And then the reporter, Alberto Rulan from Channel 47, he translated for me into English what the father had said, and we also spoke briefly to Junior's mother. Here's a clip.
¿Cuán difícil es escuchar lo que está ocurriendo dentro de la corte?
Es bien difícil lo que estamos escuchando porque son algo que uno está reviviendo de nuevo otra vez, lo que ya nosotros hemos visto todo, y algo bien doloroso para todos y para la familia y para todos. Esto ya, quiero ya que termine esto ya pronto.
¿Cuán difícil fue este día de madre para Leandra?
Bien mal también, porque sabe, como madre al fin es bien doloroso para ella también, para todos. Thank you.
It was very difficult for him, like reliving everything that they already seen in these videos, seeing it now in court. And I asked him how difficult for his wife was this past Mother's Day, and it was horrible.
This is my torture. This is my torture. This is so very difficult. That's why I don't want to see it. I put my head down. I don't want to look at the videos. I don't want to see it no more.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Junior's mother was literally doubled over with emotion at one point when she was looking at some of those freeze frames of the scene where her son was attacked. And I would like to address one thing about the case, which is all about Junior, who was only 15 years old when he was killed. What I'd like to address are some comments that I received on Instagram. A couple of people were upset when I asked the parents, was it difficult to watch the scenes today shown in court? Usually they don't speak after court, and we don't ask them questions. We're very respectful to the parents, and I think it's a mutually respectful relationship. So I just want to explain that when they said they wanted to talk, we had to keep our questions very brief So I had been sitting behind Junior's mother. I noticed it was difficult for her to watch that one particular freeze frame of Jose Muniz with her son at the door, so I did ask her if it was difficult. We try to be as informative as we can. A lot of people around the world care about Junior's mother and father. I know Junior's mother in particular gets messages from people around the world. She gets gifts. So if there is a reaction in court, I will often report on that. But I also want to be informative. I also want to let you know what's going on. Some of what I've reported on previously is being shown in court now. But there is new stuff that we've never seen before. Pretty much every day that I'm in court, I'm learning something new about the case. So let me sort of recap what happened today. The first suspect that was talked about was Jose Muniz. And the prosecutor put some freeze frames alleging that he is the person in the white tank top who was walking down East 183rd Street on the way toward the bodega on Bathgate Avenue. So a still photo of this was put into evidence. And this is something we brought you last September when we had access to some of the Junior files. So the detective, Francis Orlando, was saying, he was led to believe that Jose Muniz is the one that was wearing the tank top. And then his mugshot was also entered into evidence, and there was a photo array that was shown to the jury. The next suspect that was spoken about, you've heard a lot about him, Joe Nike, Martinez, Estrella. It's alleged that he plunged the knife into Junior's neck at the end of the attack. Well, the prosecution is saying he's the guy that was wearing the red T-shirt and a red Chicago Bulls hat at the beginning of the encounter by the bodega, but they're saying that by the time Junior was stabbed, that he had a white shirt on. He had taken off the red shirt, and allegedly that's him running away on the sidewalk with the red hat on. But we're going to loop it one more time. Prosecution says he had a red shirt on first, but then a white shirt underneath that when the stabbing actually took place. All right, let me go on to the next suspect that they talked about, Manuel Rivera. Now, he was only 18 years old when this happened. They showed some footage of him on the scene with brown hair, allegedly. They're saying this shows him in a beauty salon the next night, June 21st, 2018, and they're saying that by the time he was arrested, he had this yellow hair. That's the way Detective Francis Orlando described it. Starting out with brown hair, getting it dyed 24 hours later to yellow hair in a hair salon. And then you see in this montage of suspects that he does have very bright yellow hair. When he was taken into custody by the police a few days later, the detective said that a number of the suspects were found at an alleged Trinitarios hideout in New Jersey, but some of them were grabbed here in New York, and one of them was even grabbed in Connecticut weeks after this happened. The last suspect that a lot of imagery was shown for today, Elvin Garcia. And they were saying that he was wearing a white shirt and a white pair of shorts and a dark covering over his face. And they're saying that he was right there on the sidewalk. That's what the prosecution alleges. The defense was going into sidebars with the judge. They were upset about the way these pictures were going into evidence, but they will have a chance to cross-examine Detective Orlando when testimony resumes on Thursday. Also, there was one point when Detective Orlando was asked by the prosecutor if there was another image that's seen on one of the photos under Elvin Garcia, and he said there was a second individual who was wearing a hood. Now, what the prosecution is trying to suggest is that that person is the fifth suspect in this murder one case. They're saying it was Antonio Rodriguez Hernandez Santiago that was wearing a hood, but it's very hard to see his image on the poster that I saw, and his lawyer asked the detective, in fact, is that image not blurry? And the prosecution objected because it wasn't a formal cross-examination at that point. Near the end of the day, the prosecutor took pains to ask Detective Orlando about the age of the suspects when this attack happened. You know, the victim, Junior, was only 15 years old, and the detective replied Joe Nike was 22, Jose Muniz was 21, Antonio was 24, Elvin was 23. She did not mention Manuel Rivera, who was the youngest at that time. He was 18 years old. So one other thing that came out today in court very early in the testimony from Detective Orlando, he was talking about finding Junior's shoes on the street. And for the first time, we heard the exact location where Junior's sandals were found during the run. I'm told that he ran for at least 5 blocks from an area near Dioria Murphy Triangle, which is close to Adams Place. I was told the chase went on a long time. And today the detective testified that investigators found a pair of black Nike sandals on East 184th Street and Hoffman Avenue, and those were said to be Junior's sandals that he was wearing when he was running for his life, and he literally ran out of his sandals. You've heard me say that before. So there wasn't an enormous amount of testimony today, including some testimony about other suspects that will be featured in the second trial, the Murder 2 case. Now, one of them, Gabriel Ramirez, he had a Facebook page, and the prosecutor was asking Detective Orlando about a black Acura that was shown on the Facebook page. We have a picture, I believe, of the black Acura that was shown in court today. Allegedly, that was one of the getaway cars. If we don't have the picture, we can show. This is from today? Okay, this is a black Acura that was on the scene that night, and I believe the prosecutor is trying to establish that that was one of the 4 getaway cars used to chase Junior, initially chase him, and then used for these suspects to get away. Now, I have some footage that I showed you on Friday night showing a number of cars, and I want to show it again because there were some freeze frames showed today, which I don't have, but when you see the gray Honda, the freeze frame that was showed today, the prosecution is alleging that Elvin Garcia got into that gray Honda in the rear seat that's behind the driver. So basically, the other day when the DNA expert was on, the criminalist from the medical examiner's office, he said that Elvin Garcia's DNA, his blood, was found in 2 different cars. One of them was a 2011 white Acura, where Junior's blood was found on the door in the back, and Garcia's blood was found on a seat in the back of the white Acura. But now today it was established that Garcia allegedly was seen getting into the back of the gray Honda behind the driver, and we know from testimony that there was blood found on the back seat of the gray Honda as well, tied to Garcia. So a lot of new information came out today in court. The other suspects that were mentioned were, as I just said, Gabriel Ramirez. They're trying to tie him to maybe having the black Acura that was used as one of the 4 cars that night. And they also mentioned Jose Tavares. They also mentioned Danel Fernandez, who was seen coming into the deli, the bodega, with a green do-rag on his head. We're not clear yet why they were mentioned in the testimony today. This is all supposed to resume on Thursday. There is never any court on Wednesdays. The judge has other matters that he deals with. So before we leave you, I just want to show one quick clip from Junior's mother where she basically says thank you to the media that has been continuing to follow her son's case and all of you who have shown such an interest and such caring.
I want to say thank you very much to all of you, and I really appreciate all you do and be here giving information to all over the world, everybody, because everybody wants to know how.
¿Tú crees que con todo lo que tú haces?
So we'll be back in court first thing on Thursday morning. Court doesn't always start in a timely way. I mean, the jury's told to get there at 10 a.m. We get there at that time. Today, the testimony didn't start until almost 11:45, just before noontime. A lot of that has to do with security measures in place. The 5 defendants are moved separately. They can't stay anywhere near the same cell. So it causes a lot of delays at this trial. But it was a busy day. A lot of information came out. I will be writing some additional copy for Pix11.com. And I thank all of you for following our coverage and sticking with us as we cover the Junior trial. We'll be back with Facebook Live, most likely Friday night. If something big happens before that, we'll be back earlier. Thank you and have a good night.